All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back, son. I was on vacation, but man, I got a video for you right here. So Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson are squaring off. We're going to talk about the matchup. We're going to talk about Tony Ferguson specifically. We're going to talk about Dustin Poirier specifically. We're going to talk about their recent fights. Talk about where I think the status of this fight is. There's a lot to go through here. This is probably going to be a pretty long video, but I promise it's going to be rock solid. I have gone through this video in my mind, and it's going to be a doozy. So buckle in. But before you do, subscribe, ring the bell, all of those things. So let's do it. Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson, which is set to potentially be the best fight of all time. I mean, or certainly like on paper, this should be one of the best fights of all time. And I'll tell you why I can confidently say that. Because if you look at Tony Ferguson's previous every fight, and then you look at Dustin Poirier's previous every fight, each of them are absolute bananas wars. Insane, dude. Seriously, like when you go down Dustin Poirier's recent fights, every single one of them for the last, 6, 7, 8 fights are all candidates for fight of the year. All of them. And then you got Tony Ferguson, okay, the Justin Gaethje fight obviously was, if it would have been towards the end of the year, it probably would have won fight of the year. You got Donald Cerrone, obviously, he broke his orbital bone, right? Broke his orbital bone. I believe that, I guess that was at the end of the second round. The Anthony Pettis fight was insane. Remember, Ferguson got rocked, and then he spun out of it, and then Anthony Pettis broke both of his hands, and he was just getting beaten, and so Dr. Stoppage after 2. Kevin Lee came out hot, was winning, and then Tony fought back, got a triangle on him, Rafael Dos Anjos. That fight's bananas if you've never seen that fight. So, Jeez. The Barbosa fight was insane. Dude, oh my gosh, man. Every single fight since 2014, Tony Ferguson has had an absolute war, right? But I'm also going to talk about the status of this fight also, by the way. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do exactly what I just did for Dustin Poirier real quick, just to remind you guys of how insane Dustin Poirier's fights have been. But then I want to talk about the status of this particular fight and what we're probably looking at, and then obviously how it's going to play out in the division, etc. But so Dustin Poirier, you have the Dan Hooker fight, which, dude, really? That was insane, obviously. Back and forth, land, just punch after punch after punch. They just took it. Incredible. The Khabib fight was, it's against Khabib, so he kind of gets a pass there, but it's still, he made it to the third round. He had a guillotine choke on Khabib that, the experts thought that was deep. I knew it wasn't because Khabib wasn't tapping, which meant he could breathe, which meant he was going to get out of it eventually. But I've said that a bunch of times on the channel, though, that the announcers seem more confident that guillotine was all the way in than I was just looking at it. Now, and again, the announcers, and I've heard Matt Serra say that, Matt Serra's like a phenom black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's not just like a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's like a phenom black belt in jiu-jitsu. So anything he says, obviously, on that particular topic, he outranks me. But when I was looking at it, I just didn't look that tight. Max Holloway, remember that fight? Do you guys remember that fight where he battered Max Holloway in the first round, but then Max came back. Super, super close fight. The Eddie Alvarez fight that he won was, it was only 2 rounds, but incredible. The Justin Gaethje fight, I know I've said this before, but if you have not watched Poirier versus Gaethje, even though you know that Gaethje's not going to win, Poirier's going to win, I cannot stress this enough. You have to watch that fight. You have to watch. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this one time. No, I'm not. But what I was going to say is turn this video off and go watch it. That's how good it is. But don't do that. Just watch it afterwards. Anthony Pettis. Did you guys see that fight? Again, almost as good as the Justin Gaethje fight. And dude, that was the fight where Anthony Pettis, you're like, oh, this guy's a gamer. I know he's pretty, he's jumping off the cage, all that, but he's a gamer, man. He's a pit bull. That's the one where he had been getting beaten. He looked up at the clock and was like, ah. Amazing fight. He got poked in the eye, Eddie Alvarez and Jim Miller. That was a great fight. And then you go back to Michael Johnson. So that when Michael Johnson knocked him out. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 consecutive fights that are just wars. We're going to talk about Dustin Poirier later, too, because I am actually going to proclaim who I believe to be the most durable fighters in UFC history with the most longevity, because we're talking about one of them right now, and the other one fought last night, all right? But, I mean, I'll just outright say that right now. I think that Dustin Poirier and Frankie Edgar are the two most durable fighters in the history of the sport. Plain and simple. Like, guys that have been in the most wars and still had longevity in their career. And they, and Frankie Edgar's lost more of his wars than Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has been in these wars and he wins all of them, actually. Wow, that's a point that I haven't even thought of. His losses, I guess the last time he lost a decision was to Cub Swanson. But, when he lost to Conor, he got dirt napped in, think about that, okay? I know that I love to tell you guys how good Conor is on his feet, but think about that, all right? Dustin Poirier has been in the most incredible wars with some of the best fighters to ever do it. When he fought Conor, Conor slept him in 90 seconds, okay? First round. Not late. Now he got tired. He got hit with a shot from Conor on the side of the head, and it knocked him out, okay? That is how good Conor is, and that's how powerful Conor is. I mean, the list of people I just read off, are those mediocre fighters? No. There's a weight class down from there. Conor fought him at 145. And I realize that can make a guy less durable, but you really think that's what it was? Really think that's what it was? That it was, Dustin Poirier's durability, or maybe Conor hits like a lightning bolt, right? But yeah, but anyway, I mean, listen, and then his other loss, like in the last, 7 years, is Michael Johnson when he knocked him out in the first round. So, and Khabib, obviously. But like every other fight has been a war. He's won them all, right? And Tony has only lost one war, and that was to Gaethje. But I will say this. Gaethje's new approach is to not take punishment, right? Gaethje doesn't take punishment now. That's his whole thing. All he changed about his approach was, I'm not going to get hit like I used to. Like where I used to do the thing where I would just go and you'll break first. Like I'll take shots to give shots, you'll break first. He loved it, right? He loved it. He might have maybe programmed his brain to enjoy pain. I actually watched a video about that this morning, about how people can actually program themselves to feel enjoyment from the sensation of pain. So I think Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje certainly may be in that category. But here's the deal. Justin Gaethje didn't get touched in that fight, right? Is that how Dustin Poirier fights? Does Dustin Poirier try to avoid getting hit? No. And what's happened to everybody who's gotten hit by Tony Ferguson, right? Like what has happened? So I'm sorry, I got off topic. Let me go back. I'll come back to that. Dustin Poirier and Frankie Edgar are the two most durable fighters in the history of the UFC in terms of the most amount of wars, still competing. Frankie Edgar won last night, right? Like he's 38 years old and he won a war last night. Dustin Poirier is not as old, but he's been fighting forever, dude. He's only, wow. DP's 31. He's not, I mean, listen, again, let me backtrack on that, because it doesn't matter what his actual age is. Fighter age is dictated by the amount of punishment you take. However, how young you are in age dictates how well you recover in many cases after the wars, right? And Dustin he's done well now. Like since he's actually been kind of like a top guy, he's done pretty well in terms of or at least he did really well this last time in terms of time off, right? Like, so he took a lot of punishment in that Gaethje fight, mostly to the legs though. And he actually fought Eddie Alvarez back to back on that one. But then after that, so he fought Alvarez and Gaethje back to back, took tons of punishment. Then he took 10 months off before he fought Max Holloway, and he took a good amount of punishment there. And then he fought Khabib kind of right behind that, because those two guys were fighting for who was going to get the title shot, and that was in September 2019. Then he just fought again. So he took almost a year off between Khabib and Dan Hooker. So honestly, if he's keeping his pattern going, he'll fight again pretty soon, which is part of what I'm going to talk about. But yeah, man, I just bottom line, like those two guys are first ballot Hall of Fame guys. I mean, absolutely, without a doubt, both of them. They both had belts. I mean, Frankie actually held the belt for a while, but first ballot. Okay, so let me first let me give status on this fight, then I'm going to talk about what I think is going to happen in the fight, which I started talking about right there. All right, so I think what's going on in terms of people talking about it is I think that it's verbally agreed. Well, here, it's definitely verbally agreed to, right? It's verbally agreed to for sure, or else they wouldn't be talking about it publicly. Dana wouldn't be acknowledging it, whatever. But the fact that they haven't announced officially means that one of two things: either they haven't signed the contracts yet, or both people haven't signed and had UFC, countersign and execute the contracts yet, or contracts are signed and they haven't said what event it's going to be. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. I've never seen a UFC contract, so I'm not sure if on the contract the date and event is specified. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, so it's one of those. It's one of those. They've either agreed to the date and the event and they just haven't signed and countersigned, or they're signed and countersigned and they haven't, figured out exactly which event. So I hope everybody is clear on what event we want them to fight at, right? Like, this should be common sense. Although it would send it. Okay, so what I'm going to say, obviously, is we want them to fight at UFC 254. We want that to be the co-main event before Khabib and Gaethje. And I will. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that fight card, right? Poirier versus Ferguson as the co-main before Khabib and Gaethje. And that's what UFC does, man. If you guys are kind of unclear on what UFC does when there's not a bunch of craziness going on and how they structure the business and how they approach putting shows together, like if you think that they kind of willy-nilly just throw each card together, it's like, hey, who's up for a fight? I mean, they do that kind of, but because they used to have one fight per quarter, like back in the day they had one fight per quarter. Now they do one pay-per-view per quarter. Well, originally it was one, all they had was pay-per-view, but whatever. Bottom line is they had one pay-per-view per quarter and then fight nights, whatever. Now they do a pay-per-view every month and with the fight nights and contender and all that stuff. But what they've still done since then is they try to have one big card a quarter, right? Like where they put together they know, they know what a big pay-per-view card is, right? Like if you have Amanda Nunes headlining with someone else as the co-main, they know that's not going to be like a big card. It's great. They'll sell, who knows, and they sell 500,000 pay-per-views, whatever. But then they'll have big cards where you have Khabib versus Gaethje and Poirier versus Ferguson. And then they'll have some other bananas card on it, like some other bananas fight. Like maybe they'll put O'Malley back in, right? If that really was a perennial nerve kick and that's what did it to him, and he's like, I'll be good to go by then, they put O'Malley. I think O'Malley and Cheeto should rematch. That's what I think should be the next fight. I think that's best for both of their careers. Because if Cheeto beats O'Malley again, he's off to the races, right? It's another video. We're going to talk about that later. But yeah, so I would expect that it's going to be on 254, and I would expect them to load that card, and I would expect that card to do 2 million pay-per-views. If Masvidal did 1.3 on short notice, I would say Khabib versus Gaethje with this as a co-main, and then one other big fight will do 2 million. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think it'll do 2 million. So how exciting would that be? All right, so as far as the fight goes, who do I think is going to win? I think Tony Ferguson's going to win. But that is hinging on his recovery, right? Like we've talked about this 1,000 times. If you really follow, for those of you who are not, avid followers of my channel and are new, have, kind of come on the last few weeks or month, whatever. So here's something I'll talk about a lot, and I'll recap this for everybody. You guys know where I'm going with this, okay? When you think about damage that a fighter takes, right, and you think about a person's age and how that factors in, okay, think of the human body as like a stock car, right? But think about what it actually is, right? You have a skull, the brain inside, nerve endings, or nerves, endings, connections from brain that come down through the spinal cord, which is all right in here, where the base of your skull, brain stem, hits your spine, kind of right in the area where, right where Justin Gaethje just can, really put a lot of fucking punishment on you if you're Tony Ferguson. So it's a meat suit. Think of this big muscle, bound meat suit. And then imagine hanging that meat suit up and then think about what's going to be going on. You need clear channels for those nerves, right? You need clear channel. And then imagine if I stood in front of it and just bap, 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 bap. You know, like imagine how much damage I could do to just a big meat suit that has everything inside of it that a human being has, right? I mean, like, so that damage is going to happen, right? So when you're younger, your body will heal and get as close to back to where it was as possible. I mean, it always is going to get as close to back to where it was as possible. Okay, when you're 37 years old, it doesn't heal as well, right? And that's why guys who fight into their mid 40s and are guys who take a lot of punishment are walking, you know, I'm not like making light of that at all. I'm just saying that is what happens. Like they slow down because their nerve endings are blocked, and this, you know, the area that needs clear channels for them to think quickly and move quickly are damaged, right? They come right back when they're 25. They do not come back when they're 44. Even, I mean, in all honesty, that is a strong argument for why fighters that get into their mid to late 30s and into their 40s should be allowed to at least supplement HGH, right? Maybe not testosterone. I mean, maybe not testosterone, but HGH for sure. Honestly, if they ran like for the fighters' long-term safety, you know. And I realize people that don't know very much about testosterone and HGH are probably going to hear that and just go, "That's a ridiculous argument," right? Okay, human growth hormone does not make you big. It would probably help your speed and like, but it really improves the function of basically everything in your body. That's why anybody who's actually like really done the research. Now I've run HGH one time, and that was when I was trying to, well, two times actually, when I was trying to get my wife pregnant, right? Because like did research and it was like, oh yeah, this improves all of those functions. I literally like, and for those of you who don't have kids yet, like it's not like you just go, oh, we want a kid, and boom, banged her once and she's pregnant. But in my case, it's pretty fucking close to that because I ran HGH and that was it. But I'm saving it for when I'm older because it improves every single function you have in your body, like every function you have in your body, right? But obviously you go to a doctor and you have them, you know, facilitate it. Or at the very least, you go to a doctor, you get assessed, they tell you how to do it, and then if at some point your insurance lapses and you have a source to get it cheaper, you know, I'm not going to tell you what to do there, right? But anywho, Tony Ferguson is 37. He can't do HGH, right? He can't. So his body is going to have to recover from that Justin Gaethje beating and then hopefully move as quickly as he did before, think as quickly as he did before, and not have damage that is going to reduce his ability to perform as a fighter to a level where all of a sudden he's getting hit a lot more. But as long as he's the Tony Ferguson of old, then I love him in that fight against Poirier. I love him in that fight against Poirier because like I was saying earlier, what did Justin Gaethje do that none of the other guys who Tony Ferguson has fought for the last, you know, 50 years or whatever, since he last lost in like whatever, 2012, 2013, what did Gaethje do successfully that Ferguson, you know, that other guys that had fought Ferguson hadn't, right? He avoided getting hit. So Ferguson, I mean, everybody knows his striking, he's got huge gaps in like his technique, right? Like, but historically, it's kind of been like, well, are they gaps? Like, is his defense actually that soft, or is he intentionally having soft defense because he's like, oh, well, if he hits me, that means he's in the circle and I'll be able to hit him, right? Like, for those of you who don't really have experience, like think about like fighting on your feet as they're being, because I have just been explaining this to my daughter constantly now because now she's in Taekwondo and she is like super into it. So she's watching UFC and I explained to her what's going on. And so I'm actually verbalize all this fight stuff now. But like the way I used to think about it was like, you know, you're circling around and there's a circle that's in between the two fighters or square, whatever it is. But there's a little area where as soon as you get into that area, now I can reach you and they can reach you. I used to call it like the war zone, right? So like with Ferguson, he would intentionally get in the war zone. And once you're in the war zone, if you're in the war zone and a guy is throwing a punch or doing anything other than going like this, then his face is exposed, which means you can reach him and his face is exposed. Okay, so Tony Ferguson, his technique or his strategy was to be in the fucking war zone and to get a guy to throw punches at him. And he's like, I don't care if I get hit because I'm going to hit them and I'm going to hit him real square. And he's not a single shot knockout guy. He's a dude who is sitting in his gym and he's got a steel pole and he's just, he's turned every bone in his body into a piece of granite, right? He sharpened them to where, like, I mean, that's just, I mean, look, this is not educational to anybody who actually like has spent a lot of time in like a striking gym, but guys who fight, that is absolutely a part of their regimen, is they turn their bones into steel, right? They literally will deaden the nerves in their shins, deaden the nerves in their fists, and sharpen their elbows. And I mean, listen, the human body responds to what's it called? Stimulus, right? So you lift weights, you grow muscles. You smash your bones against steel, and it gets hard. So yeah, you're fighting against a person who has the sharpest elbows that are humanly possible, right? Think about Tony Ferguson, man. Like this is the thing I like. Okay, so let me finish this thought and then I'll come back to it. Okay, so Tony Ferguson lives in the war zone, and so does Dustin Poirier, right? So they have the same strategy. That is what Dustin Poirier does also. He lives in the war zone. He wants to hit the guy so bad that he's willing to take the shots, and he thinks that he can, and he has historically, with a couple exceptions. So you're talking about two guys who live in the war zone, and now you're just looking at it like, which one of these guys is going to cause more damage when they are hitting the other guy? Which guy is going to hit the guy more accurately? And I'm going to say this. I think both these guys have surgical accuracy with their fists, so they're going to hit each other a lot, right? Now, neither of these guys is really known for throwing a lot of like creative high kicks or anything. So these guys are going to sit in the box, they're going to sit in the war zone in the box, and they're going to trade punches and elbows and clinch, etc., and they are going to hurt each other, man. That's why it's going to be one of the best fights of all time. But again, so now you're just coming down to who do I estimate is going to be causing more damage with their shots, because I think they're both going to land a lot. And historically, people cannot absorb punishment from Tony, right? You got to think about Gaethje didn't get hit very much by Tony, right? Like that, Gaethje beat the piss out of Tony because he wasn't getting hit. He was coming in. I mean, obviously Gaethje hits like a Mack truck, but he wasn't getting, Tony wasn't landing on him, right? Like Gaethje was hitting him with 5 shots for every one that Tony was landing, okay? So looking at that fight is the one you don't look at, because Poirier is going to get landed on. So you look at every other fight, and how many rounds have they lasted, right? Just look at it like that. Like Dustin Poirier, like I said, I went through all those wars. Most of those wars were like at least 3 rounds, and in a lot of times 5, right? Like he's going the distance in some, but even in the ones where he finished the guy, they have been. We're talking about like Eddie Alvarez and Justin Gaethje. Like they went deep into the fight, even though I think Alvarez was at the end of the second round. But dude, that if you watch that fight, like it's crazy. But most of the time, they basically go the whole fight. And Tony Ferguson, that ain't the case, man. They can't do it. Their faces just get turned into hamburger meat. I mean, whether he's, I don't think it's a power thing. I think it's an accuracy thing. And like I said, I think he's basically turned his hands into where he is hitting you with the equivalent of like a chain mace. Like it's not like a normal fist. Like the guy is constantly training, man. Like constantly training. He's always training. Always. That's why it's why he's in such good shape. Like there's no that's why he like laughs when they're like, "How was your camp?" He's like, "I'm always in camp." Right? He's crazy. Right? And I say that in this format as the most positive compliment as I could give him. Like we're talking about the fight game here, man. Like, I would, in terms of the fight game, Tony's not very good, and it's too bad. It really is. But he just like, I don't know. I think he's so crazy that it makes him incredible as a fighter, but he's so crazy that he's just not very good at the fight game, right? Like the fight game is not his bag. Like he tries to do it because he knows he should, but he is like one of those guys where it's not that he's meek. It's not that he is built for one thing. He is a all-purpose warrior. Okay, like he's not built for press conferences, dude. He is as close as you're ever going to get to going in a time machine, going back to the Aztec times, and then going in and you're like, who's your champion? Assuming that they have some champion that'll go and lead their wars and then be the person that will step out and fight the toughest guy from the other tribe and then the thing ends when someone gets beheaded, and he's killed every champion from every tribe, and you're like, let's see how this guy would do in the UFC. Let's take him back and let's give him 10 years of MMA training and see what happens. Like, Tony's as close to that as you're ever going to get. He is a pure, utter warrior. Straight up. And I think he's going to beat Dustin because I think he's going to land. I just think he's going to do more damage with his shots. And I don't think, like, he's just not a guy you can trade shots with like DP has done with these other guys. You just can't, man. Like, you just can't. But, again, if Ferguson, from the damage he took from Gaethje, is not able to absorb shots like he normally does, he'll lose. I mean, plain and simple, he'll lose. Like, think about Stipe Miocic, right? Like, the kind of running theory of why he ate that shot from DC and went out so easy in the first fight, and then seemed to have eaten shots that were harder in the second and third fight, is because he took so much punishment in that Ngannou fight, and he didn't get knocked out, but that damage was still there. So he was kind of like, he wasn't all the way recovered. It's possible. I also think he just didn't see the shot coming, right? Like, at all. Like, I think that shot, he did not see it coming at all, and that's the one that puts your lights out. So yeah, I've got Ferguson. I think it's great as a co-main on a big card because this is a hardcore's dream, but not necessarily a casual's. Like, I don't think that either of these guys can drive pay-per-view numbers by themselves yet. But man, I can't listen. I love Dustin Poirier. For the record, Dustin Poirier, out of every fighter on the UFC roster, I think has grown on me more than any other fighter. Like, where he was kind of a whatever guy, like I remember when he fought Conor, I just kind of was like, oh, Dustin Poirier, like, cool, like, cool. I remember knowing who he was and just kind of thinking like, Conor's in this guy's head, like Conor's got this guy talking. He looks angry. Conor's in his head, and then Conor dirt napped him, and I was like, oh, cool, like, cool. And I didn't really have a strong opinion on him one way or the other, but man, like I said, every fight's a war. And I mean, like, I have so much respect for these really, really game guys that just go out there and they don't have a breaking point. Like, Dustin Poirier's breaking point is his body won't go anymore. Same with Tony, right? Same with Tony. But I preface that how much I love Dustin because I'm going to say I'm never going to root against Tony Ferguson ever from here on out. And again, I'm not like, I don't find myself like super aligned to his personality. I don't find myself like emotionally attached to like him. It's just there are certain things that are just right. And Tony Ferguson needs a payday, man. Like the amount of circumstances that had to happen for him to have the win streak that he had and not ever get a back end of a pay-per-view event is unforgivable. That needs to happen for him. And it's a tough road. It's a tough road, man. Like, I would say I don't like him against Gaethje ever. Like, I think if him and Gaethje fight again, what evidence was there that he's going to be able to make an adjustment and do better against Gaethje? Like, that's a 24-minute fight that looked the same from start to finish. And against Khabib, again, I love Khabib. I love Khabib in every fight except the one against Gaethje. And spoiler, what my video is going to be about when I talk about Khabib is if Khabib beats Gaethje, I'm actually going to say right there he's the greatest of all time, period. And it's going to be because Gaethje is the worst matchup for him ever. There is not a worse matchup for him on the planet than Justin Gaethje, and he's fighting Justin Gaethje, so that'll be September, or maybe it's October, I don't know. So let's call it October. So August, 3 months after his father died, who was his mentor and life partner. He's fighting him literally. It's literally like death of his father. Fight camp starts right now. If he beats Justin Gaethje in that fight, he's the greatest of all time. And I have like that. Honestly, me being able to like say that directly is like that's me walking the walk, right? In terms of why I love the sport is the narratives that the narratives that live behind these things. And that is the ultimate, because I don't care if anybody agrees with me or doesn't agree with me. This is just something that I'm correct about in terms of Gaethje being the worst matchup for him that he's ever faced and is the worst matchup for him, period. I am right about that. And So he's got the biggest challenge in front of him he's ever had. It doesn't matter what, you know, what it seems like pay-per-views. I'm talking about him. Like, ultimately, without all the glitz and glamour, Jesus, I'm stepping on this fight. All right, I'm stepping on this video. I'm going to do the video, so watch it when it comes out. Anyway, I'm going to cut it off there because I've probably been talking for like 45 minutes just about this one fight. I have so many other topics, man. Like, I'm going to have videos coming. So, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Subscribe, ring the bell. Peace.